people are interesting if you can get at the heart of what is driving them and motivating them. And sometimes they're funny, and sometimes they're heartbreaking, and almost always they're revealing things about themselves that they don't know that they're revealing, and that's fascinating and theatrical. All the songs spring from the truth of the people. There was never a conscious effort to sound like one another or be of a unified style. Maybe it just had to do with the people I approached, sharing a certain sensibility and my liking their work to begin with. So obviously it reverberated for me and therefore was within a certain world. But I just think it's the fact that they got to the truth of the people, and that's what you're hearing over and over. The only sort of disappointment for me is that I was so hoping to be able to show this to Studs one more time. And with this new iteration and with some characters that hadn't been in the show before and the new songs, and I was so excited about the possibility of not just bringing this home to Chicago, but bringing it home for Studs. There ought to be a statue of Studs somewhere over in that park, or a little monument or something to him. And so
I got involved with working thanks to a call from Stephen Schwartz, which is a call any young composer is thrilled to get. And my agent said, Stephen Schwartz is calling you, and I sat by my phone. And he said, Gordon Greenberg and I are working on a revised version of Working, and I don't know if you're familiar with the show, but you know, it's a catalog of pieces by different composers all around this central theme based on the amazing Studs Terkel's interviews in the book. And I was familiar with the book. I wasn't as familiar with the show when he called me. I knew the song Cleaning Women because that's just made it into the canon, and I've heard it, and it's an amazing song. And so, you know, it basically came out of a series of conversations. You know, he wanted to update it, but he didn't put any prescription on what that meant. He didn't say you have to write this kind of tune or this kind of tune. We just started talking about working, just the way Studs started talking about working.
There was a laborer. I'm through. I'm just a laborer. But I got that feeling inside me sometimes, rage. But what have I got to leave when I die, see? I want to pass one day, he says, I want to pass a skyscraper with my little boy. And I would love to see, we should have the name of the architect at the bottom. I'd love to see a strip of metal or something from the top story to the bottom, with the name of every iron worker, of every molder, of every scrub woman, of every secretary, of every elevator operator in that building. And there's my name among them, too. And I could say to the kid, that's me up there. That's me up there. And I think that's what it's all about.
Quite by accident, somebody heard a tape of something I had written, a children's show I had written, and sent me a letter saying that he wanted to option it for NBC. Now, it was never done, but it got me an agent. And this agent was in an agency with Mary Rogers and Stephen's agent. And apparently Mary read my lyrics and called me up out of the blue and said, this is Mary Rogers. And I said, who? Who's feeding the baby? And she said, Mary Rogers, I'm a composer. And I said, wait a minute, Once Upon a Mattress, Mary Rogers? She said, yes. And she said, I've been asked to be part of a new musical for Broadway. And I read your lyrics, and I was just wondering, and I said, yes. She said, don't you want to know what it is? I said, no, it's okay. And she told me about the show and gave me the book to read. I had not met Stephen, and somehow or other, I don't know whether we actually auditioned for him or not, but in some way he approved, and suddenly we were off and running.
In the summer of 1977, I was performing my songs in a club in Soho, and a mutual friend of mine and Stephen Schwartz, I didn't know Steve at the time, but a friend of ours brought Steve to hear my work because Steve was putting together this musical of Studs Terkel's book, Working. And that night, Steve met me downstairs in the basement of this club, and we were introduced. And we had very much in common, and you could feel something just in terms of our influences and just where we'd come from and what we maybe felt about songs. And we liked each other instantly, and he asked me to read the book and to get back to him and then have a conversation with him about the show. I did read the book. I loved it, of course. I had not read it, though I had heard about it. And we went from there. I would say Mike, the steelworker. I think his, it's why he brackets the show. His eloquence is he's a poet, and I think in so many of Studs' characters, there's a poet's heart just aching to be heard, and somehow in Mike, the steelworker, it's not just the poet's heart, but actually his way of expressing himself that comes forward. And one of the beauties of Terkel is that they needn't have the way with words to have that poetry come forward, but to have it coupled with a way with words, which Mike has, is.
I wanted the people of our community, our neighbors, and our patrons to come and be able to see themselves on the stage, their stories. And working the musical really accomplishes that. It has been reconceived and rethought with 6 actors playing over 26 parts, but yet embodying everyone from teachers to firemen, to iron workers, to mill workers, to community organizers, etc. But all people who have an everyday work job. So Studs Terkel, as of 2007 and 2008, he called this the extraordinary dreams of ordinary people. It's relevant because even from the time that this was first conceived, their experience has not changed. They still find themselves laid off. They still find themselves in jobs that have changed out from under them. Teachers who can no longer teach the way they did before, classrooms that are so much larger, iron workers who are questioned because they know how to read, people who lose their jobs because the skills that they have are no longer useful. This experience, it seems, over the intervening years hasn't changed, and as a matter of fact, in working on the show, appears more relevant than it ever has. Well, Working is not a concept musical exactly. However, it is also not your common, ordinary, standard book musical, in that it does not have a continuing narrative that goes through it, though it has thematic material that is connected by some fantastic songs. Working is unusual in its personal content, because the characters that speak to us are speaking to us in their own words. There is no script, so to speak. These are the words that Studs Terkel heard in his interviews with them. So in that way, it's a highly unusual musical. The only other one that I can think of, actually, that is as personal as this one is a chorus line in which the characters speak about their own careers, about their own experiences, but yet that is a scripted musical based on their actual testimonies. This, however, is the words of the people who are living these experiences, and therefore it makes it deeply compelling. Working is also about the people that we all know. the people on the street, our neighbors, our friends, our relatives, all people who contribute to making this the great country that it is, and yet face sometimes insurmountable challenges. That being said, one of the things that I love most about this musical is it's not about the things that have happened to them negatively. It is about their courage in the face of that. It is their courage in how to make their life go forward in the way that they would like, even if some of their dreams have been dashed. I've completely fallen in love with the piece. It turns out that these stories are so compelling in their own right that the biggest job for me, in many ways, was to get out of the way and allow those stories to be heard unfiltered and in the most intimate way we could. It's been a true joy to work on this piece and with those involved, because I think what we will finally end up with is a true image of our community. Well, the actors must be able to change roles in the blink of an eye. Most of the costume changes from one character to another are done directly in front of us, and there's a reason for that. Because that's part of the virtuosity of an actor, that by putting on a certain kind of hat, a certain kind of apron, a certain kind of jacket, a certain pair of shoes, a certain hairstyle, right in front of us, they can become two different people. And that's part of the joy of the production, is simply watching them do that. So in the casting, of course, this being a musical, they had to be able to sing extremely well, they had to be able to dance, and they had to be able to have this command of a language. This production has longer speeches than in almost any musical that I know of. And so the actors had to be able to handle that in a very virtuosic way, so that we are compelled and are joyful at watching them at their work. Also, the songs in the show are from many different composers. This is one of the genius strokes of the show. It is extremely difficult to put together a show with different composers, different styles. And yet, Stephen Schwartz and Nina Fazo have managed to do that in a way that we have composers from Stephen Schwartz to James Taylor to Lin-Manuel Miranda to Mary Rogers to Mickey Grant, to Craig Carnelia, who is most well known as a cabaret writer, but has written some phenomenal songs for this show. So with all of these different composers, they have organized it in a way that it feels like a single score. That is remarkably hard to do, and so the actors had to be able to sing and deal with all of those different styles. And so the casting of it was arduous and particular, and I think we've come up with just a great group of folks. What is uniquely my own about this is that we are employing some technical devices that bring us even closer to the personal, intimate experience of each of these characters, and relating that to the community in which they live. For instance, if you look around Philadelphia, you find that there are over 4,000 murals on the walls. The people that are in those murals are the people that are in this show. And we correlate the two of them and bring them together finally at the end, because these characters are people who need to be celebrated, who need to be lifted up, who need to be shown to the community for the work and the contribution that they have made. So with some of the technical devices, projections, live camera feed, things of that nature, we are trying to put this in a context that will make it even more compelling and immediately understandable to our audience.
My name's Andrew Deppen. I am the production manager here at Bristol Riverside Theatre. This is my 6th season, and I'm happy that it's our 30th as well. For this production, I'm also the set designer, and I'm part of a team. It's myself and John Huey, who is the lighting designer. We're also doing projections for the show. I mean, obviously, you look at the text, the script. If there's music involved, I listen to all of the music and let it kind of influence me how I feel. But typically, I'll look into the text and I'll find out what the story's really about. For me personally, I like to design somewhat conceptually using metaphors to help me. That's really what inspires me. Instead of just having a background, is that the setting is actually, it has more content than just being a thing that is behind the actors. I want it to be a part of the production. So I typically look for themes and metaphors in a script to then turn into pictures that influence my design. My process for working was, I should first say, it was very rushed. The whole design, the set design was done in 3 days, which is a lot of work in 3 days. But I read the script, I listened to the music, and basically what I focused in on is kind of how the text talks about people don't notice all of, all of the workers that are in the world, kind of mundane jobs or we'll say unimportant jobs that people are just kind of looked over and looked past. And originally, I started looking at empty warehouses. I thought it was something that, for whatever reason, this kind of forgotten, unused, dirty, used space really said something to me. And I think it was a marriage between that and maybe how some of the characters in the play feel. So for me, the space is really maybe how some of the workers that you're going to meet during the show might feel at some point in their life. So a major influence on the show, more specifically speaking, not the set, but the projections, the director Keith Baker had this really great idea, and I'm so happy that he found the idea, is to build a mural at the end of the show. Philadelphia has a rich history of murals all over the city, and many of them are of laborers and workers who have built the city to what it is today. And that's kind of the idea that we're borrowing for this production. So you'll notice a lot of the projections in the show have this painterly quality to them, because John and myself, we're trying to introduce you a visual vocabulary that you understand, and it makes sense as the show progresses, because at the very end of the show, we're going to piece together a mural of the characters that you've just met throughout the entire show. So what that process involves is finding either images on the internet, or in some cases we took a lot of photographs of our actors as the different characters, and then we process every single photo that you see through Photoshop to give it that painted quality. The idea being is that nothing looks like it's a photograph and everything looks like it's a piece of the mural. So when we put it all together at the end of the show, you've been looking at this vocabulary visually the entire show, and you can easily understand that these are the people that you've met that are actually in the mural itself.
Sunday on Ask the Pet Vet. Sometimes pets who have diabetes can get better with proper diet and insulin.
Pancreas recovers and starts making insulin again, which means they won't need injection.
New episodes of Ask the Pet Vet every Sunday at couriertimes.com. Monday on Navigating Life. If you're a senior with health issues, things can easily get overwhelming.
We're going to take a look at some healthy habits you should strive for.
Check out a new episode of Navigating Life every Monday at couriertimes.com. Tuesday on Cook This, bring the taste of the boardwalk into your home with homemade funnel cake.
They're so fun and super nostalgic.
Check out a new episode of Cook This every Tuesday at couriertimes.com. Thursday on Eat This, lessons on eating a full English breakfast from author-musician Wesley Stace, also known as John Wesley Hart.
It would help if you could hold your fork properly.
Check out a new episode of Eat This every Thursday at couriertimes.com. Friday on Cheers to You, Adrian checks out the weekend festivities at Bucks County Brewery.
A normal Friday here is like Times Square on New Year's Eve.
New episodes of Cheers to You every Friday at couriertimes.com. Friday on Garden Minute, you need to get real creative with the plants you choose if your garden is in a shaded area.
Use colors like lime green and green and white foliage to help brighten up the area.
Check out a new episode of Garden Minute every Friday at couriertimes.com.